Welcome to the Leading with Empathy podcast. My name is Daniel Murray, and my guest today is Jacqueline Hofste. Now, Jacqueline is a leadership coach. She supports many organizations and people to really grapple with and understand a bit more about themselves. She focuses a lot on some really fascinating areas of understanding our archetypes, understanding what drives us and our motivations, and we spend a lot of time exploring this really unseen world that is such a fascinating place for us all to explore. In this episode, you'll learn a lot more about Jacqueline's work, how she thinks about leadership and the way that we show up, and I think you'll really enjoy this fascinating episode. Please enjoy my conversation with Jacqueline Hofste. Hello, Jacqueline. How are you today?
Hi, I'm really good, and I'm really blessed to be here on your podcast. I'm so excited and see where the journey takes us.
Yeah, look, I'm really excited to have you as well. I love always meeting someone who's in more of the psychological space
Mm.
potentially now, but started in a similar place to me. Started in physics. Have a degree in mathematics, and it's always interesting. So maybe just give us a little bit about your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I didn't quite make it to a mathematics degree. I thought that was really something. But yeah, I did start, as you mentioned, I did start in physics. I always had an inclination to science, and what drew me to physics was sort of exploring the dark spaces like the universe, trying to understand it. And I was drawn into this unknown, into this dark, into this vagueness. And I thought, well, I might as it looks like I'm going to study physics. And I loved it. I loved my studying. I studied in Germany. I'm from Germany originally, and I absolutely loved studying and being surrounded in libraries, and also sort of peeked into philosophy a little bit and a little bit of psychology, not that much. Just I really used it up. But then the question came for me: am I going to stay at university, become a scientist? Is that really me, or am I going to go out into the world? So I decided I wanted to sort of leave the hierarchical chambers of university, go to business, which has a different hierarchy. And yeah, I really enjoyed business. I was almost 2 decades in business. I loved the teamwork. I worked mostly in software development. So when I migrated to Australia, that's when I actually took on my first real job, and I loved it. I loved, as I said, the teamwork, the delivery, the combination of it, and the excitement when something was delivered. And I really liked my corporate job. It wasn't something that I felt I needed to change or wanted to change, but I'm very much into life purpose, and purpose finds you. And it found me again, and kind of I felt like a little tick on the shoulder, as in, I think your time in the corporate is up, and you're going to focus on more on purely the people side. And yeah, I was a little bit resistant, to say the least.
How did you make that? I'm interested in how you made that decision because I'm guessing that there's going to be some people who hear this and listen to this, and they're maybe sitting in the shoes that you were sitting in, thinking, "I'm in a job. It's a good job. I get paid
Yeah,
well. I like the people I
yeah,
work with. We do good work." But there's that inkling that something might be missing. What,
yeah,
what did that feel like for you? How did you know?
yeah,
Was the intuitive signal or something that
yeah.
happened?
Well, that is a very good question, and I also help people with this transition period as well. And it's not something that just happens overnight. So I felt the nagging concern that I'm missing something. I felt that probably a few years leading into it, as in I felt like I'm missing something around creativity, and I'm not necessarily looking at art creativity, but my creative input, and it started nagging at me, and it kind of became bigger and bigger until I realized that there is something to it. And obviously, I had concerns. I mean, this was a really good job, very well paid. I could travel. And then how the universe operates. I was made, my whole department was made redundant through a merger. And I thought, okay, here we go. Here we go. So I did take some time out and traveled a little bit. I thought, okay, and enjoyed my new time. But it was also scary. It's a scary view. I wasn't quite sure what I'm going to do, but I had sort of the financial means to explore it, which was good. And that's when I started with Archetypes. I knew about Caroline Myss, and I read her book about archetypes, and it completely, absolutely mesmerized me. And I was in that space of transition, and archetypes sort of are deeper human patterns that are connected to our soul. So they're like little personas, and I identified all my archetypes that are part of my makeup. And then I cried because I could see what I was missing. And then I thought, okay, I'm on the right path. I just work my way through it. Yeah, so it can be very daunting, but I don't regret it. And it was a huge transformation for myself as well, a huge reflection on who I am. Because working in the corporate, as much as I enjoyed it, um, I did not spend that much time on myself,
Mm.
sort of more my inner development, and I always yearned for that. And I had this, like when I was a student, I had this. So I couldn't on that, and spend some time reflecting and getting sort of certified and doing different things and starting to build a business. And now here I am, and I'm glad that I'm here.
So you're a leadership coach. You support leadership teams as well, help teams sort of become more functional. And I really like this sort of things that we're joining together, because I think sometimes people can look at something like archetypes or even the word soul and think, well, that's over there. And then there's the work we've got to do over here. And these two things come together. And I think, that curiosity around physics seems to be, how do
Right.
things work? How do the people who are over here, how do they work when they go over
Yeah.
here? Is that sort of what you're working on? Tell
Oh,
us more about that.
yeah, there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, I also use my background in science, and I like science. I love science. I still read and listen to sort of documentaries around physics and where physics is. So I'm using very much the physics from a scientific perspective, but also the intuitive side. And some of those physicists, they were both. Someone like Albert Einstein also sort of uh, shared this about himself as well. That there is another side of science, and this is where the ideas come in. So the way I bridge this is with my science, and sometimes, like, well, let's say I might talk to a CEO or manager and say, do you use your intuition? And they say, what intuition? What is that? And I said, do you use your gut feel? Yeah, all the time. Yeah, so I bridge it, but I also bridge it with some science. And when people sort of get to a point where life something is missing in their life, it seems like they have the job like I had, they they have the job and the family, and there's something sort of internally nagging at them, and they don't quite know what it is. And that's sort of relating to their soul. And often people, I find, they're quite open to this these days.
Mm,
It goes a little bit deeper, and it's sort of a deeper meaning in life, a purpose in life, and people feel connected to it. And we don't just have one purpose. And as I said earlier, the purpose is calling you, and it's it's nagging at you, or at oneself, because you maybe have neglected certain areas.
mm,
And sometimes we have children, we have other obligations, and yeah, so, and physics, because I said physics has this, well, it had for me, has the fascination about the dark space, the universe. What is it? And it's very, 90% of dark matter, which is still not understood, which is fine. We don't know everything. And the psyche is also vague and dark, and what the hell is that? So I
Mm.
seem to be attracted to these areas, and I seem to be curious enough to look, and I want to look and find out, and then kind of come back with something and help people to navigate through areas in their life where they stop, where it's daunting, where they don't know, where they have certain anxieties, and if they start to understand that if you actually, and I've done the work myself and I'm doing the work all the time, if they understand that, for example, anxiety is also a good leader through the unknown and it keeps you on your toes. And there is another side of anxiety, which is usually not taught or explained. Then it's like walking through the desert. At some point, the desert is finished and you land somewhere else. And yeah, I love going though. It's not easy. It's also not easy for me. Um, but I find it absolutely fascinating then to understand and see what happens if you walk the desert. What
Mm.
happens? And I found out there is an end. And once you find out there is an end, things become easier because you think, okay, there is an end. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm teaching people also.
No, and I love that. I think, the even the idea of archetypes, I'm a very analytical type person, the maths degree, obviously, and it's easy to see archetypes as being, a bit woo-woo, a bit spiritual. But the way I sort of think about it, and I'd be keen to get your thoughts, is our brain is basically just a bunch of networks that reorganize and strengthen around certain patterns and certain the more we fire a certain pattern, the stronger that neural network becomes. And archetypes are just these preferences, these ways in which we start to strengthen our natural instincts and natural responses and reactions to different situations. And two people might sort of strengthen different types of their behavior based on their DNA, who they were, where they grew up, when they were born, a whole bunch of who they hang around when they were kids, all those sort of instructional things. And I think, ignoring that or pretending that those neural networks are completely malleable and completely open to anyone to change at any time, I think doesn't make sense. Is that sort of a similar way you think about these idea of archetypes?
Well, it definitely is a good way of looking at it. Also, when you come from more the analytical side, and it does make. I mean, the brain is a sort of a neurological network, and it looks for patterning. And I've also studied a bit intuition, which kind of plays a role into this as well. And there's been done a lot of research on intuition, and especially with people who work in these sort of high risk professions like firefighters, paramedics, emergency response teams. And they have this ability. Obviously, they're very well trained, but they have this ability to grasp the whole situation, and maybe not the whole situation, but to grasp the situation, come up with a strategy, and just implement it. And it's usually works really well. And the research shows, and I find this so fascinating. The research shows, obviously, they're skilled and trained. I mean, it's I'm not going to come up with those strategies. And they have a certain level of experience, and they use their logic, and they see clues that we wouldn't necessarily detect. But there is also this sort of intuitive gut feel in there, and that comes to play as well. And they often only have one strategy, and then the research took some of those strategies into computer analysis, and the computer wouldn't even come up in most cases with something that was, a better
Mm.
strategy. That is amazing that human beings can do that. And yeah, so there are these different levels of, this is how the brain works. But then the archetypes are fascinating also as such. When I work with people on their archetypal patterning, usually I work with a particular system that Carolyn Mace is teaching. That's where I've certified under, and we're looking at 12 different patternings, 12 different archetypes, which could be the hero, the healer, the engineer, the magician, the clown. But these archetypal imprints, they are so core to people when we identify them, and some might even come as a surprise. They think, oh my God, it's like a relief. They feel, and when I feel they sort of see their smile in their faces and they really deeply connect. That's when I say the soul comes into place. It's part of you, as you said, your DNA, your makeup. This is really who you are. So it's even more than a preference. Archetypes are so fascinating,
Can
so
you
fascinating.
maybe give us a bit of an example of some of the archetypes that you see in leadership teams or in that sort of corporate world, and how they influence what happens in the leadership team?
Mhm. That's like the um, you could say that maybe people who are in leadership roles, they have more a leadership type of predisposition in archetypes. It could be, somewhat around a ruler, an entrepreneur, even the king archetype sometimes shows up, or the queen. And with archetypes, the way it works with archetypes is they have the light and the shadow. So they have both sides. And the light side is, for example, the queen is there for her people. She has a nurturing aspect, and she is there to protect and nurture the people. And that's the light side. When the queen feels threatened, then she becomes the controlling queen. And this is what you can see then in the corporate or in the business world or anywhere. You can see both sides. So, accidentally, at some point years ago, I stepped on someone's toes who has the queen archetype. And I said something to her about her team. And she said, she's very protective. Queen archetype. What do you mean? My team? My team? And I thought, yeah, I'm dealing with a queen here. And so, yeah, the good thing is about looking at both sides. There's a shadow and a light side. And so there are some ruling type archetypes, and often you see it when we start talking about it, or I bring this into teams. Teams say, "Yeah, you're that queen, or you're that athlete." And then a mediator is also one of my core archetypes is the mediator, and that came to me as a blind spot. And then I realized as I went back into my history that my mediator was the one that caused me all this success, because I was mediating large teams who were stuck in conflict and made these projects successful. It was totally, to me, I did not see the mediator coming. I saw a few other archetypes I could see, like I have a visionary, I think quite visionary, and I have sort of an alchemist, the seeker. These didn't come as surprises to me. I even knew that before, but the mediator did come as a surprise. And that's interesting. And also with the mediator, sometimes people say people pleaser. See, that's going into the negative connotation. And with a mediator, there's a huge strength in the mediator, uniting people to a common goal. And then the shadow side is, which I also experience, is when I felt powerless. Oh my God, they're going to reject me. I don't know I can actually do this. That's the shadow.
Hmm.
And then, people try to be nice or manipulative, different strategies to make it work. So that's
Yeah.
what's visible. They are different archetypes. They're also more creative leaning archetypes, more engineering type of archetypes. I've seen the magician a few times in marketing. which I find very fascinating, the spellcaster in marketing. Oh, period.
Yeah, look, and I
Yeah,
think that this is giving people that insight into themselves. People love to know more about or try and understand themselves. And I think it's really insightful that we both have blind spots. We have underlying patterns that exist even if we don't know they exist. And I love that idea about understanding what is my preference or my go-to, what happens when I'm feeling under pressure or
yeah,
fatigued or stressed, what are the sort of behaviors that I might see? How do you then there's a couple of pieces around teams I'm interested in because one of them is how do you help teams support each other when these different archetypes are emerging, but also how do we avoid overly labeling each other? And I don't know if
yeah,
you've
yeah,
seen this before, but I see it a lot with people in Myers-Briggs saying, "Oh, I can't work with them because they're an ENTJ," or they sort of pigeonhole too much. Talk to me a bit
yeah,
about the how do you get
yeah,
to use this effectively
yeah.
together?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question. There's a lot in there. So um, with some of these personality styles or preferences, these are preferences. They can actually be adapted and changed. And also, as a leader in a business, you need to be able to work with everyone. So, kind of saying, "Oh, I can't work with this person because they're like this," that also means I'm static. I can't change. So that's not the premise I come from. And we can transform ourselves. And I look also the archetypes go below the preference of whatever these, let's say, Myers-Briggs outcomes are, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But whether I'm an introvert or an extrovert, that doesn't make me more or less successful. It's just a preference. So with archetypes, I obviously people want to understand how does my archetype express itself, especially in, let's say, challenging situation. Does my ruler come out? Does my controlling queen come out? Does my magician come out? And I'm just trying to deflect a little bit here and there. So for people, it's important for them to understand this, and then they have a choice, and because the archetype lead us through this uncomfortable shadow through the empowered side. I'm not going to become confident if I don't take any steps out of my comfort zone. It doesn't work like this. So this is where the empowerment comes in, and the more an archetype is embodied, like for example, when I started to embody the mediator, and I realized, well, hey, that's actually a powerful archetype, and I embodied it, I can also live it more. Now, the categorization, I do agree, it's a bit of concern. Oh, you're like this, and I'm like this, and I can. That's with teams and with people, it's a matter of raising awareness and working with them that they understand. Look, I know this person, maybe has a magician archetype. That doesn't mean they are a magician. Um, and kind of raising this awareness, and we can also do this in a more playful way. And sort of the labeling comes from people like to grasp if I'm dealing with this person or I'm dealing with that person, how can I be most effective? And when I understand, okay, this is maybe a detailed person, this is a visionary person, I talk differently to them, and that helps. That's a good approach. But the even a level deeper approach is if I'm authentic, if I'm talking freely, openly, authentic, this is who I am. This, being open and vulnerable enough for conversation and for feedback, that this is where the real conversations are. And then it doesn't matter so much if that's a detailed person or a visionary person, because if you're authentic, um, people trust you, and if you're authentic and open, then you can, overcome conflicts. And you sort of have this confidence which comes from inside, not it's not a pretense. And people feel it. We are wired, coming back to the body and the wiring and the brain, we are wired to feel it. If someone has a hidden agenda, we sense it. We don't know what it is, maybe, but we're sensing, oh, I'm not so sure. Let's be careful with that person.
And
Yeah.
I think this is where I find an interesting overlap with the work I do around empathy, which is
Mm.
really trying to understand other people, understand why they do what they do, what drives them, and I think there's some these archetypes give a beautiful way of putting language and giving sort of an easy sort of way of understanding some of those common patterns that happen for people all the time. Do you find yourself when you're meeting people trying to work out which archetypes they have, or are you sort of able to just sit back and stay sort of curious and ambivalent about it, or how does that play out for you?
Yeah, that's the question I often get. No, I don't sit back and, try to work out archetypes with people. I just usually take people sort of as they come. But sometimes an archetype might show up very distinctively, and I might just, see it in them. But that's more, because it might just show up stronger, but it's not, I'm not searching for it. But what I find is when I teach archetypes sort of in phases, I go through a phase and then I have workshops on archetypes, and then because I have leadership workshops as well, and then archetypes are paused for a while. When I do workshops on archetypes, then I see it more, because then I'm, talking about whatever victims and saboteurs, and then all of a sudden I see victims and saboteurs around me. But it's not that this is what I'm looking for. I found it interesting. One of my early clients, she was a psychologist and she wanted to learn about archetypes. And she said, "Oh my gosh, Jacqueline, I'm seeing victims and I'm seeing saboteurs." Yeah.
It's well, and it is that's an interesting natural instinct of humans. We like to find patterns, we like to label, we like to be able to put something in a box and say that is what it is. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard for us to not do that. And I think what you're describing is really good, because it sort of says to me, here's someone who's studied it significantly and doesn't rush to boxes. Yet what you find is people who learn a little tiny, this is the Dunning-Kruger effect, isn't it? Someone who
Oh, right. Yes,
you
yes,
learn a
I've
little
heard
bit,
of that.
you're very clever, right? Um, I wanted to also ask you about your work around confidence and resilience, and
Mm.
how do you deal with really stressful times, really challenging times, when you're feeling really tested, what's the sort of your go-to methods for building your own resilience?
Yeah, that is also a good question, because the thing is, you will always be challenged and tested. It never stops. Sometimes people think, oh, if I make it to CEO, yeah, if you make it to CEO, you have a lot of stress. Your capacity for dealing with uncertainty needs to expand. So yes, I'm also tested, and I'm challenged, and things come my way. And what I find is that I usually ground myself, rather than getting sort of flustered in my head. I ground myself, and I'm also surrender. This is not giving up. Surrender is just, this is just what's happening. I have to deal with it. And if I resist it, the more I resist it, the more it will even, make my life more challenging. So what I've learned is, and it's not always nice, it's not always comfortable, it's not always something we want to do, but I realize life comes sort of in ups and downs, and then there's, a next up and the next down, and then kind of more surrendering into it, doing whatever you can, and accepting it. Okay, that's right now what I have to deal with, and also anxiety. I mean, I've worked also a lot on my anxiety, And I used to have a time where I would wake up almost every morning, and I would wake up with anxiety. That's all gone. It took a while, and I don't have a lot of anxiety anymore, but I do still have it. It's part of life. And I find the first step is sort of not putting up this resistance at letting it, okay, I'm now anxious, acknowledging it as in right now, that's what it is. I'm in a pickle, I'm anxious, I'm afraid, and acknowledging it. And that's where a lot of people go a bit wrong, where there's kind of intuitively, instinctively, no, I don't want this, I don't want this. But acknowledging it um, helps to overcome it, and sort of being also in unicism with life, and understanding yourself and knowing there's an end to life. I'm not going to be here forever, and things have this is how this planet is, and kind of surrendering into it. And then often things can happen also unexpectedly, and accepting it. There's a little bit of this positive thinking, and I shouldn't be in this, and I think this is a little bit gone too far. Not saying you shouldn't think negatively, but life has challenges, and we need to also acknowledge them as a challenge, and not say, oh no, look at me, I'm, no, that's pretense, or can be.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I like it. I often say to people, if you want to, if you're the sort of person that every time you go driving, you feel like you get lots of red lights, and you're always sort of scorning the red lights. The advice I often give people is every time you go through a green light, just go, yes. Because you'll actually realize you go through a lot more green lights than you might think. It's just you don't notice them because you don't acknowledge them. You just acknowledge all the bad ones. Acknowledge all the reds, and so therefore it seems like there's a lot of them. And I think
that's so true.
those ups
Yeah,
and downs you spoke about are exactly right. It's having the confidence, I guess, to enter those lulls, knowing that you're going to be okay. What are some of the things you do to help build that confidence for people? What are some of the things that can make them sort of build that sense that I will be able to get through this and it won't all just fall apart?
yeah, yeah. I think it really starts with understanding yourself and creating awareness about around yourself, and becoming more and more authentic and who aligned with who you are, rather than maybe chasing something that's not actually a part of you. So I think when you start to organize your life, I mean, I've been around for a while, and I hope I can say that I've organized my life in a way which is relatively authentic with who I am, rather than chasing something that is maybe not me. And I think that helps a lot in regards to confidence, where no, I'm good with my family and my daughter, and my work. I'm happy who I am, and I'm also accepting challenges. I think understanding yourself and aligning your life with who you are, truly are, that helps. And that brings this inner confidence, this sort of embodied confidence. It's okay. Um, and um, and when the time is up, then the time is up.
Yeah.
I know I can't change it. So, either when my name comes up, that's the end of my life here, then there's nothing I can do about it. That's what it is. And
Mm.
until then, my name is not up.
But and I think
So,
there's something really powerful for leaders to hold on to in there, which is that there's the work we've got to do. There's the tasks, there's the activities, there's all
yeah,
the budgets and other stuff that we have to work our way through. But this is talking about how I do the work. This is talking
yeah,
about what sort of person am I building? What sort of attitude do I bring? What sort of patterns am I regularly following? Am I comfortable in my skin? Do I know my own preferences, styles, strengths, all of those? Do I know when I got it wrong? Do I know my weaknesses and downfalls? And when I'm going to build my team to do the work, I need to build my team so that we're working together and supporting each other. Then we can go and do the task. Is that
yeah.
that's often the way
But
I try and think about this sort of strange dynamic that some people really resist that though, don't they?
It is, and I think it comes from an underlying fear. I also see this often in relationships. I mean, some of my clients sort of are in sort of the dating phase and looking for a relationship. And I've been there myself. I've done this myself. When you're trying to hold on to someone and it's not right, or you're trying to make something work, whether it's at work or in relationships, and it's not right. And I've now learned it doesn't. If I try to make something work that's not authentic, that's not right, it won't work. It may work for a short time, but then eventually it will fall apart. So I've gained that confidence knowing, okay, if it's not right, don't waste any energy, move on to what's right, what's authentic, what's aligned with you, and then it will work. And that's also a level of confidence, also in regards to leadership and business and hiring people. I've hired a lot of people, and sometimes you meet someone, it comes to an interview, and you really like the person,
Mm,
but they're not right. They're not right for the job. So you need to discern that and then also let them go and see whether they're right for the job.
mm.
So trying to make it then work um, doesn't work.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a big advocate for, you know, we can love a person and fire them. We can love a person and part ways. We can wish them all the best and even support them on their next endeavor. We can do all of those things together. And I think that's where we get trapped sometimes. We feel like, oh, I like this person, so they've got to be the right person when it's just not really true. Um, Jacqueline,
Yeah,
I've got a few empathy questions, empathy card
right.
questions.
Yeah,
These are
yeah.
just little random questions that, well, there's about 20 of them, but they're questions that I often offer people to ask at a conference, etc., get to know each other a bit more. Here's the first one is, what advice would you go back and give your 10-year-old self?
Oh, my 10-year-old self. Um, I would advise her to follow your dreams and follow your inner path. You always, know what's true and what isn't, and just follow that path, and don't let go of it, and don't let other people tell you otherwise. Even if you may have been wrong, then you just correct the path. But you have to do what's inside of you, what is your inner nudging, your calling, your purpose, your intuition.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's good advice. I often find it interesting that the majority of workers in Australia are fairly apathetic at work. They're just not particularly engaged. And I've never heard a child, when you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, go, oh, just, anything really.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. I mean, that is so true. Yeah, no, they're excited about everything.
Yeah,
And then we've kind of lost that on the way. And why shouldn't we be excited? I mean, that's what I loved also in teamwork. I loved the sort of excitement and the challenge and just enjoying what you're doing. So yeah.
beautiful. Okay, it's your last day on Earth. What would you order as your last meal?
My last meal. I mean, oh, well, I'm thinking. Well, my first thought was a German dish, but then I thought I really um,
Like a
would
pork
really
knuckle
like.
or something?
Yeah, so actually, yeah. But yeah, let's go for that with a beer. It has to be joined by beer. I don't drink much alcohol anymore, but a beer needs to be accompanied with pork knuckles and sauerkraut and mashed potatoes and a beer. Yeah,
Oh, that is very good winter comfort food. I can almost
exactly.
taste it.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
All right, final question. Who's someone you really admire and why?
Oh, um, quite a few people. Um, well, oh, God. Well, let me go back to my last big corporate job, which I really quite enjoyed, for a company called Schneider Electric. I can say that I enjoyed my time there, and they had many good leaders, and there were challenges, but it was a really good company to work for. And their um, CEO at the time, he's now chairman. His name is Jean-Pascal Tricoire. He was the CEO for almost 20 years, I think 19 years. And he turned this company around. And he's so authentic, such a level of integrity. And I still listen to him. And so focused. And he actually did this. He did this, kind of turned this flagship of a global company with 140,000 employees around. And he was also awarded best CEO, top CEO in France. It's a French company in France at the time. Yeah, I still often listen to him. I admire what he's done and created. Yeah.
What about what's something like what's the he do that you think is part of that magic that he brings?
Oh, he was just 100% dedicated to the company, and the company is around, a lot around manufacturing and energy management. And he started the campaign, and we're talking, this is now, um, I started there 2007, it's a while ago. I did stay there for a while, but, and he started this campaign about reducing energy consumption, and he was so dedicated to this company and the mission and the cause. And being each time he was talking, he was so present and focused. And this is what I'm doing. And then he did it in a very authentic way.
Mm.
I'm not saying, it was all glorious and fun and there's no politics, but also, the French had this great attitude of transparency, which I've learned from them. They were very inclusive, and they were making sure if we start a new project that everyone who needs to know about it is informed, very open and transparent. And that was something where I was really impressed by. And after working for such a large company, I worked for a very small company, and I thought, oh, surely this small company, everyone knows everything about everyone. And it wasn't. I was very disappointed. This large global corporation had so much collaboration, and people were informed and knew what was going on. Yeah, and he had a great leadership team. I was, oozling my way up. I was just 2 levels below. Um, Oozling my way up to get into his team, but now I'm here.
And I'm so glad you are here because I'm sure you're helping many, many people in your current work. And it is a really good story. That idea of leadership it doesn't matter if the company's big or small. It's about the behaviors, it's about the attitude, it's about bringing that authenticity and delivering, right?
That's right. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Jacqueline, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And if you want to get into touch with Jacqueline, should we send them to your website, to LinkedIn, to all of those things?
All of those things. Yes,
Okay,
I am on LinkedIn. Thank you. Under my name, Jacqueline Hofste. I also have a website, which is under my business name, nhedwana.com.au.
we'll put
I
all the
also,
links
yeah.
in the
Oh,
comments as
thank you.
well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
wonderful.
And thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed the conversation. I really get your empathic approach and your questions. And I felt so welcomed and so understood in what I'm doing.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. And look forward to catching up with you soon.